We have too many managers and not enough doers. It's not your fault. This is just how it is.
We need to talk about your TPS reports.
Yeah, the cover sheet, I know. Bill talked to me about it.
Yeah. Did you get that memo?
Yeah, I got the memo, and I understand the policy, and the problem is just that I forgot the one time, and I've already taken care of it, so it's not even really a problem anymore.
Yeah. It's just we're putting new cover sheets on all the TPS reports before they go out now, so if you could go ahead and try to remember to do that from now on, that'd be great. All right.
What if I told you this kind of stuff wasn't merely annoying, but actually killed companies? It's true. In 2016, Harvard Business Review said that corporate bureaucracy costs about $3 trillion per year in productivity. The study actually says that if we could reduce the number of managers, we'd get more productivity and more output in most lines of work. You need management to run a business, and God knows, most startups generally need more management rather than less, trust me. But most businesses could use less and be better off for it. And if you're a founder coming from a big business, you better pay attention. Today, we're talking about what infects companies and what eventually kills them. It's called corporatism, and we're gonna figure out how to deprogram it. Let's get started. Here's one of my favorite scenes in Office Space. Here's the jump to conclusions Matt guy trying to justify his job as a PM to the consultants who are going on a firing spree at the office.
What would you say you do here?
Well, look, I already told you. I deal with the goddamn customers so the engineers don't have to. I have people skills. I am good at dealing with people. Can't you understand that? What the hell is wrong with you people?
Now this is an extreme example of someone who clearly wasn't doing the thing they were supposed to be doing. And where else does this happen except big corporations? People become corporate do-nothings because it's easy to become disconnected from the act of creating when you're at a big company. Even at the best big companies, employees mostly do things that look like work but aren't. And you wouldn't even be able to tell. Getting customers is trivial with a large installed base, sales force, or huge brand name. There are huge revenue streams, and it really covers up any sort of failure in quarterly financials. Founders from corporate backgrounds aren't stupid, they're just used to doing things and having something happen, regardless of the quality or effort put into their own work. In other words, they have the wind at their backs at a big company, and there are lots of things that you can do at a big company that would never work on your own. Once you get to a startup after a stint of taking credit for other people's work for years, it's bewildering to work really freaking hard at something and have no results to show for it. But this happens all the time. There's just no air cover for that at startups. You don't have backup troops. It's just you versus the world. So naturally, if your product or service sucks, then your company dies. You can't just look like you're doing stuff. You actually have to make it, almost totally and on your own. Here's a clip from Ford vs. Ferrari, great movie by the way, where race car builder Carroll Shelby sits down with Ford CEO Henry Ford II to talk about their recent loss.
Give me one reason why I don't fire everyone associated with this abomination, starting with you.
Well, sir, I was thinking about that very question as I sat out there in your lovely waiting room. As I was sitting there, I watched that little red folder right there go through 4 pairs of hands before it got to you. Of course, that doesn't include the 22 or so other Ford employees who probably poked at it before it made its way up to the 19th floor. All due respect, sir, you can't win a race by committee.
He's right, you know. Did the Ford CEO really need that army of suits in between the people who do the work and him? Does the 2021 Ford CEO need that now? Do you need that? You know that answer is no. You ever work at a big company and find that you're doing things over and over again when there's some external version that is as good or better that you don't have to rebuild internally? For instance, Uber took years to switch to Slack because they had already invested very deeply in their internal version of Slack called UChat. The reason why this happens is very simple. Engineers and managers, especially people a few years into their careers, they want to get promoted. And how you do that at a big company is not just by making good decisions, but also by having the skills to create. So rather than go out and find the best thing out there to use and use it, you're heavily incentivized to show that you have both of those things, that you can go and find a trend-following buzzword idea that everyone already wants and then build it yourself. Built-in job security. Why does it happen? Well, because in addition to wanting to get ahead in corporate hierarchy, we love our own ideas. Professor Dan Ariely did a great experiment to actually show this. In the study, he asked people to come up with solutions for climate change, but a strange thing came up as he looked at the results.
People had our solution, and they had their own solution, the one they created for different problems, and people valued the solution they created much more. They thought it was more important, more useful, more creative. They would dedicate more time and energy and thought to it. So it turns out that in the process of getting attached to stuff, it's not just about physical stuff. We can also get attached to our own ideas. We can fall in love with what we've created.
Now, this is actually really useful for those of you who are a startup selling to other companies, SaaS or enterprise. You got to keep this in mind because that's what you're going up against. So that's why one of the biggest things we find ourselves asking our founders, especially in SaaS and enterprise, is who gets promoted if your solution works? Remember, decision makers want to get promoted. That's the number one thing middle managers prioritize. So ask who your customer is and what they want. Yes, they want to make money for their company, but only if they get what they want too. Okay, so while we're talking about not invented here, I wanted to mention a startup we funded called Narrator.ai. One of the biggest things a lot of companies do when they start building is they build data tools just for themselves from scratch over and over again. Not invented here syndrome. Usually just to figure out how one metric affects user behavior like conversion. But you don't have to do this anymore because Narrator has created the optimal Analyze button. Here's exactly how that magic Analyze button works.
And then choose the driver you want to analyze. So I'll analyze how referring domain influences my conversion rate to completed order. And in just a few seconds, you can generate a full analysis with concrete and actionable recommendations. From there, we can skim the key takeaways or dive deep into the analysis to understand exactly what led to each finding.
Don't fall for not invented here. Use the best tools, and Narrator is the best tool for all your data needs. Visit narrator.ai to book a demo and find out how Narrator can help you understand what's going on with your startup in a fundamental way. Now, let's get back to deprogramming corporatism. If doing things that aren't effective don't get you fired, then what does? Usually making mistakes that make your boss look bad. Big organizations are just groups of people, and they sure like to talk shit. The one thing you can't do is look like a bozo. It's fine to work really hard to no effect. Hey, you worked hard, but if you become a social liability, you're donezo. The Space Shuttle Challenger actually exploded, and that was a really huge mistake. And it happened because of this slide. What you're looking at is an actual PowerPoint presentation by Morton Thiokol, the builder of the rockets. In the aftermath of the disaster, designer Edward Tufte actually points out that everything needed to prevent the Challenger disaster was in this chart. There were 7 failures here out of 24 launches. But instead of easily picking out those 7 failures, the people who were making decisions were overwhelmed with chart junk that didn't have anything to do with those failures. Now, the other thing you have to pay attention to is this. What you're looking at down at the bottom of this page is a classic cover your ass disclaimer. In case something happens, it's not our fault. In some sense, This kind of dynamic is unavoidable since we are all social animals. Startups can sometimes develop a cover-your-ass culture too, but that's the job of the founders and the CEO to keep people focused on things that actually matter. One of the things I try to do is I try to make it less costly to make mistakes that had a positive expected value. We're all gonna make mistakes. Taking risks is a part of our journey. The point is not to avoid risk, the point is to avoid needless risk. It's a dial, a knob that you have to be aware of and tune into. People cover their ass when they feel like they're in a no-win situation and they don't know where that knob is set to, even when it's not necessary to cover your ass. Find the right level of accountability versus risk-taking, and then hold people accountable for the stupid stuff, but make sure they don't have to cover their ass for even the things they can't avoid. What's the opposite of when things go wrong? Credit taking. Just as covering your ass is sending the blame elsewhere, the opposite also happens. Good things happen and you get promoted when you're associated with it, even when you might only be tangentially related. I made a whole episode about this recently on how to get promoted and smash any ceiling. This is a big part of that episode, so link in the description for that one. It's a real and very common problem in all human organizations. How do you avoid it? Well, this behavior begins top down. As a leader, you can model the behavior you want by passing credit throughout the organization. Be on the lookout and penalize people who might be hogs for credit, and make it a core value. We're a team. We recognize each other. If you pass praise to the people who do the work, you'll find that your people will do the same. How do you avoid looking like a bozo? Well, for one thing, if everyone in the world out there is saying it, then nobody can fault you for it. So getting the right corporate white papers or latching yourself to the right buzzword du jour, like big data, Internet of Things, or whatever it is, it's sort of necessary for a lot of people to blend into the pack. Oh, that big data initiative failed? Well, everyone else was doing it, so our ass is covered and we won't get fired. Founders get confused all the time and then wonder why they fail. We said all the right secret words. Why am I failing? Because it wasn't ever about those words to begin with. Startups can't survive blindly following buzzwords or whatever trend is hot because you actually have to know what's coming in the future and be right. That's all there is. If you choose the wrong market or you're wrong about what people want, you're toast. I'm not saying all things with a buzzword label will fail. I am saying that startups for big data, for instance, actually have to make life better for specific customers such that people are willing to pay for it. It has to make sense. It has to solve a problem. It's not enough to be attached to that name, and it's definitely not enough that you're reading about it on TechCrunch or Twitter. This was a really tough lesson for me to learn personally. At 23, I turned down the shot to be the first engineer at Palantir, now worth over $40 billion, even though Peter Thiel personally took me out to dinner to recruit me. I thought buzzwords were actually the signal, and absolutely zero of the mainstream press or tech blogs were abuzz about the latest hot government enterprise software startup in 2004. That's because enterprise wasn't hot, selling to government wasn't hot, and software, yeah, I guess people still like that, but that wasn't something that people were that excited about in 2004. It turns out that you still have to work on things that A, you know are right, and B, most people don't know yet. This is why Peter likes to ask, what super valuable company is nobody building yet? Experienced founders and their executives who have grown up in big companies, they're not doomed to failure. Actually, the reverse is pretty true. Those who succeed have avoided, overcome, or escaped the problems we just talked about. The recurring theme simply seems to be results. We spend a lot of time trying to get founders to focus on action and results, build product, talk to customers. That's it. Think in terms of concrete numbers, whether it's user growth, savings to the customer, or revenue. Who gets promoted when someone uses the thing you made? There are lots of places in the world where you can survive without results and without asking those questions, but startups, they're not one of them. Just as corporate culture is a culture that is learned, not innate, founder culture is learned as well. And I think this is one of the biggest reasons why we're sitting here doing YouTube. It's one of the reasons why I'm trying to continue to build Initialized in our Initialized Capital community. It takes fundamentally changing your surroundings and the people you're around. It takes avoiding that terrible co-working space and working harder than you have ever worked before in your own space. All these simple things add up. If you're aware of the things we just talked about, you can root it out, you can get rid of it, and you can get better. You can make something that matters. You've got to keep activity over results, not invented here, cover your ass, take credit for other people's work, buzzword thinking out of your company. And actually, this may well be the central reason why a startup can succeed. You've got this. Let's get it. If that was your first episode, thank you so much for making it all the way to the end. We're here every single week to talk about what are the cultural things that you need to create a great startup. You might be an executive, you might be someone starting out, just deciding whether you even want to join startups, you might be an engineer. No matter where you are in the journey, you're in the right place. Click subscribe and click the bell icon and leave a comment down below. I want to hear from you and I want to help you build the thing that you are meant to build. As always, be well, and I'll see you next week.